Welcome everyone to another DesignOps Aligned podcast. I'm gonna keep that bit in. I love that. I've actually just lost where I was gonna go with this.
You were going to introduce the show.
I was actually going to introduce the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everyone to the Aligned podcast. Maigen has already stunned me. I've actually lost track on what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do this intro. But I am glad she's come on the show today, and we're going to speak about a very controversial topic, which is very, very important to me. And I think one of the key things I wanted Maigen to really come or actually talk about on this show is the struggles that people are going to go through with the subject that we're going to be talking about. So welcome, Maigen. Do you want
Hello.
to do a quick introduction about yourself? And
Sure. I'm Maigen Thomas. I am officially now the founder of a design agency. I started it last year after I left my full-time job. I've been in UX for a little over 10 years, going up on 11 years. And I started as a front-end developer when I went through a full stack boot camp, and then naturally fell into UX after I figured out, like, wait a sec, I could either make the button or I can make someone click the button. Ooh, that sounds very interesting. So I ended up building my career from there. I've taught a couple of three cohorts at UC Berkeley and have realized that like boot camps are not helping anyone, or they're helping a couple people, but not totally. And now I am trying to make the world a little bit better of a place every day by bringing accessibility to small and mid-sized organizations.
Maigen, that intro is very interesting. There was a lot for me to dissect. And one of the key things you just mentioned, which is kind of a similar what I went through from moving from development to designer. You mentioned about can you develop the button to make it somebody click the button? Now, both disciplines are different in its essence. And how was that transition for you?
Really, I like how you worded the question. How was the transition from development to design? It was really easy for me because I was on a really small team. We were a really well-funded startup, but we were still very much a startup. And I had a tight team. So our entire design team was also our entire front-end development team. So I was brought on as an intern first, and I worked on some really small, low-level things, obviously, like you do as a junior. And then as I grew in my skills, I kind of felt more confident in saying, hey, I think we can do this differently. And I didn't even realize what I was doing was UX until my lead designer slash front end developer was like, oh, that is exactly the right thing we should do. And we can test that by doing X, Y, and Z. And so I learned a lot of the methods for becoming a designer or being a UX designer just kind of on the job because I had someone who was willing to mentor me. Now, that person, it probably sounds like, oh, well, they were just a front end developer. No, they're actually now they're a VP. No, not a VP. That's a high level. They're like a director, a UX manager at Amazon. So, like, they have had an extensive career in UX. And I just happened to be lucky enough to learn on the job. I wouldn't say it was total luck. Like, I demonstrated my knowledge, and that's how I got hired. But being able to bring that development sense into understanding the user experience, it was kind of a really natural fit. I don't know how you did it. Did you go to a development boot camp? Did you learn coding in school?
No, I learned it as you did. I learned it on the job,
Yeah.
being a designer, and I learned it in a hard way because developers and designers clashed in really building stuff together, because they
Yeah.
spoke different languages. They really spoke
That's
different
why I
languages.
love being able to speak both languages. It's literally
Hmm.
being that bridge between like, hey, what we think blue sky, like open
Yeah.
ocean, what can we do? And then talking the language of the people who are like, okay, but dial it in. What's possible? Like what's actually
Yes.
technically feasible?
Yeah.
Being able to speak those both of those languages made me like, it's not a unicorn, but in smaller companies that don't know that that's possible, like I was incredibly valuable. So I loved coming from that direction into UX.
Well, it ties in with this whole subject we're going to be talking about. I think once a developer kind of sees a designer knows that knowledge, it kind of makes them relax because they're like, oh wow, he knows the effort we're going to go through, like the technical viability, the technical capacity needed to do something.
Yeah,
And I think it really does build that relationship together.
it does.
Now Now it ties into this whole subject that I've brought you onto the show about, and the whole show is really talking about accessibility, and how we need to be more kind of compliant with our products that we're creating. Now, the reason why I started with that development question is because I learned about accessibility through a developer, to be honest.
Nice.
Um, and it came down to the fact that my designs were not really accessible. It was the fact that I was designing, thinking about users or the certain persona of the product as my main focus,
Mhm.
and really not giving any thought to any accessibility. And that was
Mhm.
during my career. That was in my early days of my career. And it was actually a developer that brought my knowledge to this. Now, from your perspective, do you think that's what's happening now in the industry, where designers are not being taught the key skills to design for accessibility in the beginning?
I yes. I do think that designers are not being taught the skills to bring accessibility in from the beginning. But you said a really good word kind of at the beginning, and I was trying to do the listening for comprehension and not listening to remember what I wanted to
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
But I love that you brought up the whole like compliance with, accessibility guidelines. I think of it as not just compliance, but compassion. So, as designers, if we come from empathy, then we should want to make sure our designs are available, perceivable, operable by anyone, regardless of their level of ability. So, compliance is just a way to meet regulations, but compassion is a way to meet our users' needs.
But they see, it's such a hard one because a lot of designers, and I get a lot of slack about this, a lot of designers that are coming into this industry now are not being taught the fundamentals of what we were
Mm-hmm.
taught when we were going through our career. You know, we, you know, we do love the shiny thing at the end, but I was always taught like you can only build a house by building the foundations, and the house will only stay strong if the foundations are there. Now, most of these designers that are coming in nowadays are just thinking about the decoration of the house. There is no kind of ground fundamentals behind that. What's your take on that?
Oh gosh, I love this because this is literally the analogy that I use to help people understand accessibility more. So, the web is inherently accessible just existing. It is us as designers and developers, when we add all of our fancy bells and whistles, literally with JavaScript, we make the web inaccessible. So, HTML, the foundation of the web. So, I wanted to also clarify I focus on website accessibility because it's so prevalent around the world. I am learning to do more of like web app accessibility, but like, hey, there's a lot to know. So I focus on the fact that like the HTML is the walls, it's the floor, it's the door frames, and the decorations. That's the CSS. That's the stuff that feels nice and looks pretty, and we love how it did a thing when I hover over it. And then the JavaScript is what makes the door latch and makes the window lock. Like these are really important things, but they're also just they're nice to have. Like that's also, I guess, the analogy is we're living in a perfect world where no one goes to another person's house without being invited.
Yeah.
But the framework there is the important part, and this is why I would argue that designers do need to understand how to code. Not that they need to be good at coding, they just need to understand what the elements are and what those semantic elements do in order to make designs that are functional but also easy to use.
Megan, I'm gonna take a stab at this. And I've worked with teams in the past, not just only from DesignOps Aligned, but generally in my career, where part of the company's culture has not been to cater to accessibility, and it
Sure.
happens to many many companies. But when they
I'd even
do,
argue that it's most companies right now.
yeah, okay. um, but then when they do have to act on it, and I mean, like we've got these accessibilities acts coming in thick and fast in Europe at the moment.
Mhm.
A lot of them are panicking, and especially on the design front, they're like, I don't even know where to start. It's like I've never even been taught this. It's like, you know, it's like they're having to go back to ground one and understand the base of accessibility. And then I have, and that's one bit. So they don't understand accessibility. And then the second thing is like, do I just need to check the color contrast? This is all I need to do. Well, I need to make sure my font is only a certain pixel size. So it's like miseducation and uneducated. Now, what would you say to people listening to this podcast who might fall into that category?
Well, you're not alone, and there's nothing wrong with
Hmm.
what you've done so far. Like, I never want anyone to feel like everything that they've done is crap. No, that's not true. Even the bare minimum, the very, very basics, you can still learn them and apply them, and you'll actually make things a better experience for all of your users. It's so funny that you mentioned color contrast because, yeah, it's the basics, it's the bare minimum, but would it shock you to know that 81.1% of website homepages out of the top 1 million homepages, like of all the websites, they have color contrast issues? Like, you say it's this basics, but it's still low hanging fruit that 81.1% of websites are missing. So if all you do is make sure color contrast is accessible for all of the pages on your web app or on your website, fantastic. I actually want to applaud you for that, because clearly you're doing better than 4 out of 5 other designers and developers out there. There are other really small things. I love to call them the low-hanging fruit. You can pluck this low-hanging fruit and future-proof your organization for at least another few years. And then everything else is, I don't want to say it's an edge case, because that minimizes what some people's experience is on the web, but there are other things that you can build in as you continue to build out or improve your pages, or just even snippets, section code snips of pieces of pages. Like, it's totally okay to bring things along as you learn. You don't have to fix everything at once.
I've had designers state this to me, and you probably had it in your experience, where the reason, and some of them do know the accessibility guideline. Obviously, there's so much. I don't know.
There's
I
so
don't know
many. There's so many. There's
everything.
no way to
Yeah,
memorize them all. I'm trying. Don't
exactly.
worry.
Yeah. But I've had designers say to me, like, they know the accessibility guidelines, or they know the basis of it, but the reason why they don't act on it is two things. And you can quote me if I'm right or wrong with this. One, their product managers are not, they're not advocating for this sort of stuff. Very, very common. Second thing is they believe that it messes up their designs.
Mm-hmm. Both of those things are really good points. The first one, I love that. And you're absolutely right. I don't want to hang this on the shoulders of the product managers, but if their lack of awareness makes them not willing to prioritize accessibility fixes, well, we can fix that too. And I definitely did not come on your podcast in order to promote my book, but I'm going to tell you that
Go for it. Go for
Practical
it.
UX is coming out in May. And there's a course that I am actually going to be promoting here really soon that's going to happen in June. That is not just how do you check for accessibility and identify the issues, how do you prioritize those issues on the timeline so that you don't lose velocity on the initiatives that you're already building. So I really want to see product managers and developer managers in there to go, okay, well, what does that mean in order to bring these accessibility fixes into our product and slipstream it into what we're already doing? Because I do believe that they have resistance because they think it's going to mess up their current velocity, which makes them look bad to the stakeholders that are like, we don't really
Yes.
care about accessibility. Can you make that feature happen? So yes, product managers can not get out of the way. They can actually start to come alongside designers and be like, all right, so if we just need to increase the size or the color contrast of these pages, let's prioritize, put those in the list, make tickets for them in Jira or whatever your product management tool is, or your software development tool is, and then like push those changes out over time. And like that makes it really easy. The second part is, yeah, your designs don't always look like the super slick, fancy, native mobile app kind of experience. But I would argue, is that the intention of that particular app? Some designers really like to make things overly complex and overly designed because they like how it feels. But I think you also need to consider your audience. essentially it's where people argue that it doesn't make their designs look good. That's what it was. People were saying, well, what about video accessibility? And they're like, well, what about TikTok and Instagram? And I said, well, that's a different use case. The entire point for you to be on that native mobile app for Instagram or TikTok is to watch videos or is to watch pictures. It's not so you can go read someone's novel. That's not what that web app is for, that mobile app is for. But if it's video embedded on a web page, yeah, you should put some effort in to make sure it's accessible. So it's more about the use case than it is about what the designer wants. And yeah, sometimes we have to make decisions that hurt our feelings because we like tell that scripty that fancy thing happened or that CSS animation. We like how it looks, but if it makes people unable to buy our goods and services, you're actually doing a disservice to the company in justice to your ego. Like, does that really make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it. Drop your comments below in the description or in the notes what we just mentioned. If you're experiencing this of trying to get your designs to be accessible at the same time, experiencing some form of, how should I say, destruction to your designs, Maigen's here to help. We would love to hear your comments and thoughts about this. And if you're a product manager and you're struggling to also understand accessibility, please drop your comments. We'll love to hear as we go on. Maigen, I wanna ask you a very controversial question. Do you think it's the responsibility of the designers to advocate accessibility, or do you think it should really come down from our VP of products?
Really, really good question. I love that. In a perfect world, I would love to see the VP of product care more about accessibility. And I think they can and they will if they understand the return on the investment of accessibility. So if we can help them understand that there is logic to making a product more accessible, and that in return brings you more money, makes you more sales, or reduces your costs or eliminates your costs, then that will make a VP or anyone who understands like the business behind the design of something, that would make their ears perk up and they would go, oh, well, yeah, obviously I want to bring in accessibility. If it can make me more money and reduce the actual cost, not just the potential of a cost. I've stopped telling people like you can be sued for accessibility because honestly, the odds are quite low. It would suck to be that 1 in 1,000, but the 999 other people are like, I'm gonna get away with it for a little bit longer if I can. So I think, yes, if VPs and other design leaders understood accessibility more and how it has a business impact, then we would see more of those people advocating for it. But for right now, I do see it as the designer's responsibility. And I don't see it as it's only their responsibility. I think developers have some part to play in this as well. And this is one of the reasons that I created the course to bring designers, developers, product managers. I really want to work with corporate teams so that they understand that this is not hard, that this isn't a heavy lift, that there's actually not that much coding involved to make some of this actually really accessible. There's a ton of edge cases. There's a ton of situations that require a little bit more in-depth work, but the low-hanging fruit is probably 10 to 20 fixes that I really wish I could explain how simply I mean this. Sometimes it's a line of code or a line of CSS, and you're suddenly in a better place and your customers are happier and people are more willing to spend money with you. And if you can help make that impact as a designer, doesn't that look good on your resume? Doesn't that feel good to say, I made an impact?
It does. But I want to backtrack to the question. I think I've only seen VPs really act on making stuff accessible. And as you just mentioned, if there's a return of investment. And the time I've only seen them act on it is when they've worked or when they've had to work with a client who's paying massive amount of monies and they are being accessibility compliant. And that's the only time I really see VPs start to say, we need to be 2.1, 2.2 compliant. What's your take on this?
Yeah, when there's money on the line, it suddenly matters more. If
Yeah.
it's either a client that says, hey, this is required because it needs to be accessible, it doesn't matter for what reason. When the
Hmm.
client requires it to be accessible, that's money. So if you don't make it accessible, you lose money from that client. Or if you do get sued or fined by a government, because again, the EAA, the European Accessibility Act, that becomes enforceable in about a month and a half, I believe it
Yeah.
is. No, okay, 2.5 months, something like that. But it's going to become enforceable. And I really, I'm a little giggly about it because I'm like, well, I'm looking at my, my nails like, I told you kind of thing. But I think we're going to see some massive changes. I think it's going to be slow for bigger companies. I think the smaller companies are going to be more agile and they're going to be able to make changes faster and adjust to those market needs. But I think as we see those accessibility regulations passed, not just the threat of lawsuits or financial action, but just the sense of humanity going, wow, we have a lot of folks coming out of what we call here in the US. I don't know if you call them this around the world, but the baby boomer generation. There was an enormous baby boom post World War II, and those folks are all coming of age at the same time. It's a cohort of humans. So in the US, 11,000 people a day are turning 65. And granted, they're probably not on, I mean, what's the slickest mobile app I can think of? Robinhood, where you're trading stocks and
Okay.
doing like micro interactions. It's really involved in the stock trading process. I think of that as like super slick, super fancy. It's almost gamified because it gets people in and maybe even borderline addicted to like, ooh, taking action. So maybe we don't see a lot of baby boomer generation folks on that app, but they're still going to do something similar to that. So there are tons of competitors who could actually get an edge up on an app like Robinhood or, any equivalent app in any industry. If they are more accessible, sure, the more slick, the more fun, the more, bells and whistles, the younger folks might identify with it. But we have a lot of humans who are still going to need that technology, and whoever is going to corner the market on accessibility is going to win that business. And
I
that's a
love
lot of money. They have a lot of money to spend.
I love that. I'm going to backtrack on that statement that you
Yeah,
just made in a
do it.
second. I want to get your take. Now, in my years of working in accessibility, I have found you need the right ingredients. And I always use the word ingredients. I always think like in order to build software or build a good product, you need the great ingredients like a researcher. Um, I believe I need, you need a behavioral scientist, a content
Mm.
writer, and a designer. Now, when it comes to accessibility, I've always seen that the responsibility to provide content is always put on a designer. They will never hire a content designer or a UX writer to help with this. Now, and I'm talking when you have to put stuff for ARIA labels and, just general image descriptions, etc. I have seen those responsibilities put on designers and they're like, well, I don't even know what to do. What would you say, like, what are the right ingredients in order to make a good accessible product from your opinion?
Gosh, first, I've never seen a perfect team. I would love to. I think I got a little misty eyed when you're talking about like a content designer and someone who does UX writing. And I'm like, we would love to see that. That's actually what I talk about when I teach my workshops on how to actually do the website assessment for accessibility. I say, this is some of the small things we look for, like how many lines of text are there? How long are those lines of text? Is it easy to process? Are there appropriate spacing between the lines of text? And I mentioned,
Wait,
this would be ideal. Oh, go ahead.
wait, did you just mention the golden ratio aspect of
Yeah, no,
line?
there should
Oh
actually
my,
be a 1.5
what
spacing between the lines of text. It's easier to
I have
process.
I have not heard a designer in a very long time use the GRT calculator. It was my backbone of any of my designs. And when I asked them, "Do you use a GRT calculator?" They're like, "What's that?" And
Right.
it's like, wow. I'm
Where
glad
did
you
you learn
mentioned
about
that.
that though?
Yeah, I just learned that from general design because it's like the golden ratio and the Fibonacci numbers is all part of God's mathematical equation.
I
Everything
love
is
that.
in, yeah, everything's in that golden ratio. And that's how I knew about it. And that's how I learned design. I learned that bit, and then there was many other things, but that was the main core. And I
Yeah.
haven't heard
The
anybody
design
talk
principles that
the,
you
yeah, design
We don't
principles.
teach that anymore. I don't see people coming out with a knowledge of design principles. I got to be honest, I didn't even learn about that until probably 5 years into my career when I started looking at like deeper into design principles and the Gestalt laws and stuff.
Yeah,
But
oh
I did
god,
learn
yeah.
about Fibonacci when I was doing coding because we used that to build. We built the Fibonacci code. If you put in a number, it will Fibonacci the rest of the sequence and like give you the outcome. Not that I could like at a glance check it and make sure it was accurate, but like I could write that code. And I didn't realize that you would bring that into design until much, much later. But it reduces cognitive load. It makes it easier
Yes.
for people to understand. And yes, that can be put on the designer, but I think the title of UX designer is heavily overloaded right now. We are expecting them to be an accessibility expert, a design expert. They need to know how business impact comes about from design. They need to know about product management and software development life cycles, and they need to manage stakeholders, and they need to make presentations. Like, how much are we going to overload this one job because we're too lazy or we don't know how to hire a content designer and a UX writer? And like, sorry, I'll kick over my
No,
soapbox
no,
right now, but
no,
like,
I
that's
I love that. I love that. But that's what I think the people who came from the generation of learning the fundamentals knew exactly that, that designing or being a UX designer, as you just mentioned, there was loads of stuff thrown on to us. Um, and designing or actually making the pixel stuff was like, for me, it was like 20 or 15% of the work.
Mhm.
85% of the work, or 80% I sometimes say on the show, is that ability to say, okay, I can speak to stakeholders. I can start bringing the impact. I can start thinking about your information architecture. I can start thinking about the semiotics of the icons you want to use. I can think of your
Mhm.
brand awareness,
Oh,
the key
yeah.
things, tone of voice, semantic differential. And, those are the key things I learned when I was coming up in my career. But the people now who are now coming into this career are saying UX design is that stuff you do on Figma.
Mhm.
It's not the rest of the stuff. It's getting
Yeah,
misinterpreted.
it is.
So,
I think it's
uh,
the fault of both how we teach design right now. Like, there's a reason that I won't teach at the boot camp anymore because I feel like we're failing people in
yes.
that only some people who are coming in are actually prepared to transition into a real job after that. We're teaching the quick and dirty, like how to build an application, but we're not teaching logic behind it. We're not teaching design principles. We're not teaching how this fits into the larger scheme. We're not teaching design ethics. We're not teaching anything more than like, here, go to Figma and make some pretty boxes. And that is, like you said, 15% of the job at best.
Yeah.
Enjoying the content? Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram for more updates. Your support helps us bring you even more great content. Now let's get back to our podcast.
I think one of the key things I've seen over the last 5 to 8 years, well, okay, I'll say the last 5 years, is this explosion that people can do UX. Now, we've just seen over the last 2 weeks, I think it's been on social media, it's been spreading around everywhere. I will mention it on this podcast because it is something that we can talk about, of ADP lists.
Mm.
Obviously, the ethics and everything have been called into question at this moment. But I think one of the key things that a lot of people have been mentioning on social media platforms is the fact that people were going into ADP lists and thinking, okay, I can just learn this stuff from 5 or 6 people, do a few sessions, and then I am now an official designer. Now, do you think, and tying back into the question about boot camps, do you think the industry has to change in certain elements in what we're teaching people to come into the industry from your perspective?
I do think we need to kind of change people's perspective. I love that you bring up ADP list. I was talking about this with someone just last week, and I can't remember who it was, but essentially we commoditized mentoring, and mentoring was never meant to be a commoditizable resource. It's very interesting to see how many people have kind of taken the word mentoring and think it's transactional. They think I can go on ADP list, find a random person, ask a question, get some eyeballs on my portfolio, and boom, I've been mentored. And that is not the case. I will say that I was mentored in my first job, and that's how I learned UX. And that was a 3-year period. I came in as an intern, like super nervous, ready to work super hard for not a whole lot of money. And I really like leaned in. I think I probably did 12-hour days every day of my first year because I just wanted to prove myself. I also came in after going to a boot camp in my early 30s. So like I came from not having a degree and going to a boot camp and feeling that anxiety and pressure of that, but found myself in a position where folks were willing to mentor me. And that mentoring is not 30 minutes on a Friday. That mentoring is almost daily meetings. It's check-ins. It's, hey, what do you think of this? And them saying, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. So have you thought about X, Y, and Z? And it's an ongoing relationship, not just, signing up for a meeting that someone happens to have available and hopefully catching them at a time that they can pay attention to you. It is way deeper than we've made it in the last few years. So it's disappointing to see, but I understand why it got created. I understand why ADP list was necessary. I think maybe it's run its course.
I brought Felix onto the show. He was on season 1's. He was actually in season 1's, kind of like our main type of person that we brought in. I do like what they believe in. Obviously, what's being said is being said. I keep myself, as being a podcast host and everything, I have to always keep myself in the middle with everything. But I think, it does come down to many, many aspects of what type of people are coming into this industry. Have they been shown the right things? And then it comes down to the topic of accessibility. Why are we not doing enough to teach people the basis of accessibility from your perspective?
Why are we not? Because not enough people that are in positions of power have figured out how disabled they are yet. I think that's what it is. Because we're only temporarily able, as Cindy Lee said, and I'm evidence of this. Last year, I fell off a horse. I had no business being on this horse, and I was going too fast, and I was not confident, and me and the horse had not determined who was in charge yet. It was supposed to be me. It was definitely her. And I fell off a horse and broke my arm, snapped it right in half, my upper arm, like the ends were not even looking at each other. And my first thought was, well, at least it's not my dominant arm. So I could still use the internet. I just couldn't type effectively. I was doing the one-handed thing, and there was a lot of things I couldn't do in my day-to-day life. So I suddenly became temporarily disabled. But that temporary disablement of me not having an arm to work with is the same experience as a person with limb differences or a temporary impairment of a person holding a colicky baby and they can't put their baby down even for a short period of time. They still need to get something done. So what we have is a bunch of people who are very, very able, and like here in the West, we definitely have the American sensibility of independence. I can do it myself. I say who, I say when, all of those feelings of independence. And we have not yet realized how dependent we are on other people and our technology. So again, that baby boomer generation, more and more people are aging into becoming more disabled. Like you and I are both wearing accessibility devices on our faces, but glasses are very normalized. 100 years ago, this was indistinguishable from magic at some level for some people. But this is just an accessibility device to make sure I don't bump into walls and that I can see you clearly on my screen. So we have folks who have not yet started their advocacy, but I see it coming because they are so close to becoming that temporarily or permanent disabled or disabled state of vision impairments and hearing impairments and motor impairments and cognitive impairments. We're all on our way towards that. It's just whether or not we've gotten sick enough yet, or we've gotten injured, or we've just gotten old enough.
Wow, that is such a powerful answer. Amazing. I really love that answer because, you mentioned to me And just so everyone knows, I met Maigen just before the show. So we kind of like, with all the guests that come on, we always kind of speak about the topics. And one of the key things she mentioned was what she just said. We're all going to go through that state of needing products to work for us as we get older. And, we're coming into that generation, and myself especially. We're going to be coming into that generation where things need to be more accessible to our generation, even though I'm born in '83. So what am I? I'm a Gen.
You're definitely you're in the millennial. I was born in 81. So technically I bridge the gap between, I'm an exennial allegedly.
Oh, okay. So us millennials and, what did you say? Exennial?
Exennials. I'll take a millennial though. I claim
it. We're going to need this stuff. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that answer. We are going to start needing this as we start to age. And then that comes into my next question, Maigen. Do you think that's why there's been such I don't want to use the word hype, but there's been such a prominence about being accessible due to the fact that our generation, and I think our generation was in the boom, the IT boom, the web boom, you name it. We've seen everything. Our generation has actually seen everything. If you think about it.
Our generation is the one that transitioned from analog to digital, which makes us probably the most powerful generation on the planet right now. We know what's possible, and we didn't grow up with a screen that beeped at us. Like, I honestly feel bad for kids that are much younger, like Gen Alpha and Gen whatever the next one is, because they don't know. Whereas we went from doing keyboarding classes. We know a 5.5 inch or a 5.25 inch floppy. We know Frogger on the old beige computers. But we also know, like, ooh, this is fun and new. I think it is our responsibility because we know what's possible.
But it comes down to, do you think that's why there's been such a kind of push to be, I'm going to use the word compliant, sorry to use that. But you think that's why there's been a push, because our generation are now coming into that stage of using applications that need to be accessible, from your opinion?
I think so. And I think it is not as specific as that. Like, you've put the words to a feeling that I don't think people have articulated, but there's a nudge in the back of their brain that's like, it would sure be easier if the text was larger on this. I'm finding myself at that age, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I have more compassion for my mother, who was always holding the phone super far away, or not even the phone, holding the menu super far away. I think it's because we're coming into this age that we're starting to recognize it. But I think we're a couple years away from people going, oh, wow, no, this is by default. So I'm going to say it's 2025. By 2030, it's going to be default that everyone brings the accessibility into it. I'll put my name on that bet. 5 years from now, it'll be a default mindset. But right now, I think we are feeling out what that looks like. And it is helpful that people our age are gaining those disabilities and going, oh, this is hard for me. And sometimes we get very used to our technological experience. So we forget that, we do need to increase the text. Nobody wants to go into their iPhone settings and be like, I'm old, let's move the text up a size. But look, it makes it easier to read your text messages. Just do it. I use my accessibility features all the time. I love hitting Control twice, 2 taps of the Control on my keyboard, and now I've got my dictation, and it does a really good job of capturing what I'm saying, including punctuation, question marks, etc. And now I have a way easier time of communicating with my technology because I can talk to it as opposed to forcing me to type or using my mouse. Really came in handy last year when I only had the one arm to navigate with. And that actually tipped me into using more of my accessibility features. And by the way, Apple does a fantastic job of this.
You just mentioned something I didn't know about the double control hit. I've always known about the tab index. Tab index is key in accessibility design. You have to make sure
keyboard navigation is necessary.
Keyboard navigation, yeah. And so do you think, and I'll take the question in a different way. Do you think people that are going to have accessibility issues are going to know how those kind of secret commands on keyboards and stuff like that I just didn't even know about that one, and I've been doing accessibility for a while. So what's your thoughts?
No, what's really interesting is I think you end up discovering these, and this is why it's amazing to talk about, because you'd be surprised every time I post about like, oh, try this. And they're like, wow, I didn't even know that was a thing. So when I do workshops on Tuesdays, it's 4 hours long, and we evaluate a website together according to my practical UX method. It's like a 50 something accessibility checks and probably another 20 something usability checks. And I bring people through, they have no concept of what some of these are and like the accessibility features, and then they get really excited. So now they're evangelizing. Now they're advocating and telling other people, did you know that you can just press control twice? And I think it is something you have to turn on, or if you accidentally hit it on your Mac keyboard, it'll be like, oh, did you want to turn on dictation? And so it will introduce those features to you, but not until you discover them. There's no one who takes you aside and be like, okay, Pumpkin, now that you have glasses, let's show you all of the features that you need on your Mac. That isn't how it works, but I feel like we could do a better job of that. And that also comes back down to the designer and the developer. If you're building a web app or a mobile app and there are shortcuts or features or accelerators that help people get access to what they need faster and also supports an accessibility or a disability, then make that clear to people. That's where we have the overlay tutorials. That's where we have the tooltips and pop-ups, or just simply adding some extra text to say, did you know? And that way making sure a screen reader can read it out loud to the user. So bringing the awareness is helpful. Making features more accessible and promoting the accessibility of them is going to be, I think, a next step.
Drop your comments down below if you find any shortcuts. I just found out that one just now. So if you know any shortcuts, please share them. I would love to know because, it's something I'm still learning as I go along. Don't get me wrong.
Same.
I'm going to do some product placement now.
Do it.
I mean, in DesignOps Aligned, companies have asked us to help them with their accessibility, mainly more, I would say, helping the design process with the accessibility. And what I mean by that, making sure our handover process does have some form of accessibility. And tab index is like the key one we always, or, keyboard navigation. So we really do emphasize that when we work with companies as a main thing, as part of the handover process. And I found also what we try and teach them is also work with developers, because developers are not there to fill in your ARIA text there. They're not there to put in your description labels. They're there to put in the code snippets for you, but you have to work with a developer to this, because they will also find code snippets that sometimes goes amiss when you're handing over some documents. So that's what we tend to do at DesignOps
a
Aligned.
handoff from design to development should never be like a PDF or a Figma link and then good luck, see you later. It should always be a meeting. It should be, hey, here's what I'm anticipating. Here's what I've put in place for accessibility, but let me know, like, let's have a conversation if you run into issues on that, or if you haven't done it before. Like, I think there's another situation that we face here right now is people in a world where information is accessible at our fingertips in an instant. I think people are reluctant to say, I don't know, or I'm not sure how to do that, or I've never done that before. Could you help me? And I think it's partly because expectations for jobs are like, so you got to be able to hit the ground running. And we don't allow people to fail gracefully and learn gracefully in our environment. So basically making that conversation happen and being open to saying, I'm not sure, I haven't done it, let's figure it out together. I feel like we could open opportunities for that a little bit more, and it would be more accessible because now we have information that is shared. We have shared knowledge.
I think that's whole part of our generation career ladder. I think what happened, and that's my 2 cents in it, I think the career ladders that me and you went through allowed us to fail. We were learning. We were, learning on the job. If we look back at our designs that we done 5 or 10 years ago, it's embarrassing. It's just like, oh God. But it's part of that learning curve. If you didn't do that, and I think I've never spoken to anyone in our generation who's never had the cringe factor from their old designs.
If you don't cringe, then honestly, did you grow?
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what I was about to say. If you never cringe from your designs, then you have not actually grown in your process.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant one. I love that.
Yeah, there was a really good quote by Ed Lattimore, and I was reminded of this the other day from one of my own mentees, in fact. But they were saying, embarrassment is the cost of entry. If you're not willing to look like a noob, if you're not willing to look like a beginner, then you're never going to be a graceful master. And I really take that to heart because I like to give people the space to not fail, not to feel like a failure, but to not get it quite right on the first throw and know that that's perfectly okay. And for some reason, I might blame social media on this one, but like we only are allowed to present our best selves, our highlight reel, our perfection, and I fall prey to it all the time. Especially as a female presenting person, like I feel the need to look perfect at all times, and I have to laugh because I don't even know if we're like promoting the video, but like my little sweat mustache that happens over here, like I'm embarrassed that I'm human. So it's kind of the same situation in the design world where we're too embarrassed to show our early stuff, but that unwillingness to be embarrassed by our work and to get feedback is what holds us back from true greatness, because
Yes.
we're never going to grow until we rip that Band-Aid off and say, okay, tell me what's not good, call my baby ugly, and then help me become a better designer and a better person.
That's brilliant. I think, the initiative to take feedback and to say, like, help me improve. It's a big step, which I think a lot of the people that's coming in need to learn. Don't learn Figma. You can learn that as you go along. Learn how to communicate. Learn how to take creative criticism. If you learn that,
and even the sucky criticism, not the great criticism that's very creative, and like I will give you like the most loving, generous, supportive criticism because I struggle with like tearing people down. But like sometimes you got to take that shit's ugly, and we're not going to put that in front of customers, and you're going to be like, okay, that I didn't love that, but you grew from it and you made a better product. So we've got to be able to do that for people and to give them the space to make that maturity leap, which is what contributes to overall company UX maturity. We love to complain about a company that doesn't have UX maturity. Well, somebody's got to be the adult in the room sometimes and say, all right, we're going to level up, and we're going to level up together, even if it feels icky.
Brilliant. Are you having a sweaty mustache because of my voice, or is it just
absolutely. It's your voice. No, it's the perimenopause. it's the super classy, I'm being a woman of a certain age, loving this. I thought this was in like your 60s, but no, apparently that can attack you in your mid 40s too. Yay.
Oh, man. We'll have another podcast about that.
We don't need to. We're good.
Oh, God.
Sorry.
You made me choke. I'll make sure they edit that one out. Maigen, we're coming up to the last bit of the podcast.
Yeah.
And I do want to backtrack something around the whole generational aspect. Do you think that we're going to start seeing a segmentation of users? Meaning that, are we just going to see products coming in? And I know we've got these compliance acts coming in, but are we going to see that users of the younger generation are basically just going to make products for that generation, as we did going up through this career ladder?
I don't think we are. That's a really, really good question. I think it's a two-parted question. No, I don't think there's going to be segmentation. And I think it's because people are going to continue to understand accessibility and recognize that we cannot segment people with disabilities out of our marketing and out of our sales. There are, for every single product that's out there, there are disabled users who are using their own assistive technology or augmenting in some way to make it work for them. And maybe they haven't yet like spoken up too much to say, hey, you're really disabling me from using the product that I pay for. So when we recognize that we can't segment people with disabilities out, because remember, anxiety is a disability. When we have a timer on how long it takes you to check out your concert tickets for those particular seats, that causes someone to be disabled because the anxiety kind of takes over their prefrontal cortex. Like it's harder for them, and we can alleviate that as designers and developers simply by making it easy to extend that timeline, still book those tickets, but make it a better experience. So segmentation is not going to be a thing, I don't believe. And then your second part of the question is, this younger generation, are they going to make, products that are more aligned or more specific for their generation? No. And I say this because I have so much faith in this next generation of humans, because they are more inherently inclusive. They recognize that excluding people and having just exclusion, by treating people differently, it is not the world that they want to live in. So I have faith that this next generation of designers is going to be willing to make sure that they're building inclusively, and they're going to find creative ways to go, I love how this looks. It makes my design feel beautiful and sexy, but it also still works for every user. And that's the enthusiasm that I see socially and culturally for this next generation. And I believe that's going to bleed over into our design and our product development.
Brilliant. No, I really hope so, because as you mentioned, it's something that's very, very important. And again, you know why I say it's very important? It was actually our conversation. It's what you mentioned. We are going to be coming into that age when we're going to need accessible products. And it really hit me when you said it like that, because, touch wood, great health and everything, but at one point we are going to deteriorate, and, we're going to need these products to support us. So yeah, I'm really glad you brought that statement. It's
I appreciate that. I think more people should identify with it. The people who don't yet identify with it, let me leave you with this. That generation of the baby boomer generation, some might refer to a few of the characteristics of some of these folks as Karens. Well, they didn't invent the Karen name. We gave them that, but they invented the behavior. And these are also probably the wealthiest generation and the most litigious generation, at least here in the US. So if a company is not thinking, oh, well, compassion is the reason that I need to bring in accessibility, how about lawsuits? Because even if the DOJ here in the US isn't going to come for you, Karen will.
Yeah.
Karen will let you know that she cannot use your product, and she has paid X number of dollars over her lifetime, and it's definitely not acceptable. I promise you, someone's going to let you know it's not accessible. So if you want to avoid those conversations, making it more accessible now is just a smarter plan.
Yeah. Well said. Maigen, there's going to be loads of designers watching this. We also have product managers in companies that also watch this. I would love to get your 2 cents, what you can give to them, what kind of support you're giving out there, what kind of courses. So I'll leave the floor for you to really tell everyone what it is you do and how you can help them.
Lovely. Thank you so much. I am I am genuinely thrilled about focusing on accessibility. For me, it's a logical thing because of the number of people who are aging into disability, but it's also a personal thing. I have ADHD, I'm on the autism spectrum, and I have auditory processing disorder. So if I'm not able to hear very well and the words get very garbled, so it's very a strange experience because it only has kind of presented in the last 5 or 6 years of my life. I hope people get excited about this. And I'd like you to know that I'm here to support you. Every week I do a workshop where I literally teach people through the entire process. It's a 4-hour workshop. Tickets are $15 to $25. And you can watch the recordings on my Patreon at the free level. I've got a course coming up to teach people how to do this in their corporate job and bring along their product managers and their developers so that everyone can help move accessibility forward. And I've got my book, Practical UX, that's coming out. So if you're an early career designer, especially if you've come through a boot camp as a career changer and you're just not sure how to break into this industry, please know that this is probably the worst job market we've seen in this industry in a decade. And it is going to change. I know that. There is not going to suddenly not be a need for designers. So if you can specialize in something like accessibility, you're going to future-proof your career. And the book is going to help you get paid to get that real-world experience and gain skill and facility with accessibility audits. So I've got a ton of products and services and ways that I can support you. And I'm also just always available. Hit me up on LinkedIn or hit me up on an email. It's maigen.thomas@gmail.com. I'm super happy to support, because if someone gets excited about this, like, then I'm even more excited. I will meet that excitement with more excitement, and we will just have this little excitement party about making the world more accessible.
Perfect. We will drop all the links that Maigen just mentioned in the show notes. We will post it up on LinkedIn. We'll share her contact details. Again, drop some comments below. I think if you suffer, well, no, I wouldn't say suffer, but if you have some form of neurodivergence, please let us know. Let us know of any applications that really are not catering to
Tell us
your
what you
needs.
wish was more accessible. Like, literally
Yeah.
drop your complaints in the comments, and let's reach out to those companies and say, hey, you're making it difficult for me to participate in what I know you would rather I work with. And I would love to know what those are, because when we know better, we can do better. There's a lot of things I still don't know. So yeah, drop
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, love it. I would definitely love to hear the comments. I mean, I have a son who suffers from ADHD. I'm still learning about it as I'm going along. Still a lot for me to learn. But it really has opened my eyes up as a designer. And I think if you speak to Maigen, you will learn a lot from her, and what she can teach you in helping you. So yeah, we would love for you to get in touch with her, and yeah, let's make the world more accessible.
Yeah.
So
Just a little bit better of a place. The kind of place we want to live in. That's all.
Definitely. Maigen, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm glad you got back to my emails. I was like, I was pestering her. I wanted her on the show.
Oh, well, I'm so sorry I blew you off. I apologize.
No.
That was not my intention.
But I'm glad she gave us the time today, and it meant a lot to us, for the team as well, for you to come on, and we would definitely love to bring you back on another point. So
Thank you. Well, let me know if there's anything I can do to support anyone that's listening. This is really and truly my passion in life, is to help other people feel successful.